Dr. A.M.A. Saja. He is a senior lecturer, Faculty of Engineering, Southeastern University of Sri Lanka, who will be talking about localizing SDGs in Sri Lanka and the challenges. Dr. Saja worked in the disaster management and the humanitarian aid sector as a project manager and program officer for 7 years in 2 international organizations. He worked for Humanitarian Aid Office of the European Commission, that is called ECHO, Sri Lanka and Maldives in Colombo, and where he monitored the implementation of projects in the humanitarian disaster preparedness sector in Sri Lanka, mainly in the north and east of Sri Lanka. Before joining ECHO, he worked as a resource development manager and then as a project manager of the learning support and capacity building program of Red R UK in Sri Lanka. And in addition to that, Dr. Saja had delivered several training courses as a lead trainer, and his focus areas included disaster risk management, community participatory approaches, right-based approaches in the humanitarian sector, and project cycle management. He is currently an international fellow at CHRHS of Brown University, USA, young scientist at IRDR, China, and Global Community Solutions Fellow of IREX, Department of State, USA. Over to you, sir.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and from different parts of the world. And thank you, Moni, for that introduction. Let me share my screen. Right, I hope my screen is visible. Right, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to talk about SDGs and the local perspective and the challenges, which is also an important topic in the context of climate change as well. So I'll be talking about this localizing SDGs in Sri Lanka and the challenges, and I have divided my session for the next 15 minutes into 3 sections. So first, I will just talk about the context, the localizing efforts of SDGs in Sri Lanka, and then I'll be just briefly go through the challenges in localizing SDGs, as well as I'll just present some work that I've been doing in the southeastern Sri Lanka, and we'll share some of these experience, mainly with the youth, as you have been, as SDSN have been working a lot of work with youth, so it will be more relevant as well, and also with the community. So first, in the context of localizing SDGs, there have been a recent evaluation of the performance and progress of implementation of the SDGs in Sri Lanka. Well, it's not that very recent, but there have been different reports that have been published on the progress of implementation of SDGs in Sri Lanka to give you a larger context. So there were 2 reviews. One was by the national government, which was kind of a voluntary national review, and then a voluntary people's review was also there in 2018. And then later, which is the latest report, which shows some of the future directions, and which also highlights key challenges in localizing the SDGs as a transformation agenda in the new normal, which means in the post-COVID context. So some of the data that I'm going to share are from these reports, just to give you a overall context, how the SDGs are being applied in Sri Lanka. So I have just picked up few key indicators of some of the SDGs, not all, because the main problem with the SDG progress and the evaluation is that there is lack of data, and when there is a data available, it's more disintegrated. So there is still a gap in the data integration. So I'm not going to go into the details of all these the contextual indicators which is relevant to Sri Lanka, but I'll just touch where we are now. So in terms of no poverty, zero hunger, and the good health and well-being, the kind of the first three SDGs, Sri Lanka has been doing well in the sense, although there are some gaps. Sri Lanka has been doing well since 2015, and also particularly after the end of civil war in 2009. So in terms of no poverty, Sri Lanka has been progressing well, but still there are gaps and there are regional disparities. And then the kind of urban poverty is also kind of increasing. There's a good coverage of social protection schemes, but still there are some challenges in terms of targeting and also adaptive social protection mechanisms. Zero hunger, in terms of that target, only around 10% of the population is moderate or severe food insecurity, but it is also seasonal, sometimes due to drought and other climate shocks or economic shocks. And health, in terms of health, and also in the fourth SDG, Sri Lanka has been doing well, and Sri Lanka has good systems for health and education. So if you look at the health indicators, the main challenge that Sri Lanka is now facing due to more urbanization, the non-communicable diseases are on the rise in the urban areas, and so it has been an important challenge. And road accidents, the deaths due to road accidents, deaths due to human-elephant conflict, deaths due to chronic kidney diseases have been a problem as well in Sri Lanka, which recently have been on the highlight. Some other indicators on education. In general, Sri Lanka is doing well on education, but there are a lot of reforms need to happen. There are a lot of pressure on reforms, particularly on value education and inequality in education, and then transforming the education for better economic growth. Some other, I think one is amazing, which is gender inequality. For example, if you combine the education and gender, there have been a problem as well in terms of women enrollment. Well, women have enrolled high in the tertiary education in the universities, but there is still a problem that women climb on the ladder further on leadership positions still very low. In terms of water and sanitation, clean energy, there have been a lot of focus on this because Sri Lanka is covered 100% electrified, but still now the focus is more towards renewable energy sector. So there is a lot of things to talk about on that in terms of climate change as well. Some other SDGs and indicators, sustainable cities and communities have been an issue because urbanization is increasing. For example, in 2030, 80% of the Sri Lankans will be living in urban areas. So there are increasing city population, but the land is very limited. So the congestion and the problems, social problems, are going to be high. And that also create a lot of problems on waste generation, waste collection, and then disposal, as well as air quality. As you know, when we have more urbanization, there'll be problems of air quality, and that may lead to non-communicable diseases. Similarly, Sri Lanka is also on the climate hotspot. Natural disasters is one of the major threats to Sri Lanka. Sustainable consumption and production have been also an issue because the recycling of waste, if you can see, it's very less. There is lack of mechanism at the local level for proper waste management and the reduction of the consumption of, for example, the environmental friendly products, or there are a lot of use of plastics, and that lead to many problems. For example, Sri Lanka is an island, so for example, in the coastal regions, the marine pollution is very high. For example, in the global rating, Sri Lanka is on the 5th in the marine pollution. So it's really a problem. And Sri Lanka is also rich on biodiversity. There are 35 biodiversity hotspots. Sri Lanka is one of the 35 biodiversity hotspots in the world. Forest cover is 30%, but due to the development, there is always a trade-off between the forest or deforestation as well as the development. So this has been an issue, and this will be an issue in the future as well due to urbanization. And human wildlife conflict is another problem Sri Lanka is facing due to either encroachment of people into the elephant corridors or the elephants coming into the communities have been an issue. Right, so just to give you a snapshot of where we are in terms of some of the selected SDGs, just to give you an overall view where we are. So let me just, before we go to this localization, challenges in localizing the SDGs. So as you know, Sri Lanka has, in terms of governance, Sri Lanka has two different systems. That is one of the complicated system to understand sometimes for new people, because we have a national administrative system as well as a devolved or not completely devolved political system, but it's partly devolved system from national to provincial to the local authorities. But at the same time, we also have an administrative system from the national government to district district secretariat to the divisional secretariat and to the smallest administrative division in the community, which is called Grama Niladhara division. So we have two systems. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it has its own problems. Right. So in terms of challenges, I'll be just talking about the challenges in this framework. As we know, three pillars of sustainability: social, economic, environment. But we also will have the shocks, like social, political, economic shocks, and maybe due to COVID-19 as well, but also in terms of the general economic crisis. Climate change. Sri Lanka is on a hotspot in the Indian Ocean for climate change impacts, and disasters as a result have been increasing. So within this framework, I'm just going to go through some of the challenges in localizing SDGs. Again, some of the challenges that are in general that have been highlighted in the recent reports as well as from my experience. So the major problem is that SDG implementation efforts are not guided within an integrated framework. So it's sometimes institutionally fragmented. Some people work on one, another institution works on another one, but there is lack of coordination and integrated plan for communities. So that makes the real implementation of achieving the targets and real implementation of SDGs difficult. The data gap is an important issue. The deficit in proper data and then well-informed decision making for proper local policy has been an issue. And lack of technical capacity, know-how at the local authority level, and lack of proper process for implementation. That links from local to national and national, and comes down, the policy comes down from national to local, there has been a gap. And the low awareness has been an issue. That is one of the most important issues on SDGs. Although government tries to make policies that and link the SDGs and trying to bring it down to the local level, there is lack of awareness on SDGs. Although people sometimes talk of sustainable development, but there is lack of awareness even at the institutional level in the government, and so then it's same also at the local authority level, the local politicians or the kind of the people representatives also lack good awareness and capacity. So that will then trickle down to the community level. So there have been some efforts, as you can see. I put one more kind of a challenge. It has been a subject of non-state sector. Sometimes private sector talks about it, NGOs talks about it, but there is lack of real kind of motive at the local authority level, and then so that kind of gap is still there. So there have been some push from the non-state sector, but finally it comes to the people and also people representatives at the governance level. So that gaps is a real challenge. And sometimes the bits and pieces of development, it's people representative find it difficult to articulate the sustainability concept in the overall integrated development planning, and then that will have impact on the financing as well at the local authority level. Although in the post-war context, there is the peace has been there restored, but still there are problems with social cohesion, and still there are some problems of increasing divisions among the communities. And then, as it is common in this part of the world, the short-term gains for social political in social political platforms and developments are driven not by real needs, but it's by more of short-term gains. Finally, as I said, Sri Lanka is also vulnerable to multiple shocks due to climate change, due to other environmental issues. So lack of resilience is another problems to achieve SDGs and localizing the SDGs. Right. So since the focus is on the context of climate change, I just put this slide just to show how vulnerable Sri Lanka is to the climate change. We have floods in most part of the country. We have landslide in the central part, Central Hill, and poverty is there in comparison, and then chronic kidney disease in north central part of the island, and then scarcity of water is there in some dry zone areas. So this is, I mean, if you take almost 75% of the Sri Lankan population is moderately or moderately vulnerable to climate shocks. Yeah, so that's the kind of a context. So as I explained, our risk is very complex. We have climate change risks, as well as due to urbanization and population growth, and there is a kind of a pressure in that area as well, and other environmental hazards in the coastal areas and also in the urban areas, and due to that, then there will be health problems. So that we make the urban areas more vulnerable for living. So risk is very complex. So we need a risk sensitivity in the development initiatives when we do sustainable development. Right, just to touch on the latest commitments. Well, it's sometimes it looks very ambitious, but Sri Lanka has committed to increase its forest cover to 32% and reduce greenhouse gases by 15% in the main sectors. Right. Finally, I think I have a few more minutes to finish, so I will just go through some of the efforts on these local initiatives among youths mainly, and also at the community level. We have started since I come from the engineering faculty, where we have just started to raise awareness on sustainable development goals among the undergraduates and the youths in education institutions, but mainly in the university, where we started to kind of kick-started the programs on World Engineering Day for Sustainable Development, which is now an annual flagship program, where we do a lot of competitions and we talk of regional challenges. And I just recently, last month, published a book in local language on sustainable development goals and challenges, targeting the local government and community institutions to give them an awareness how these SDGs need to be looked at the local level, and what are the challenges, and how we can overcome those challenges at the local level in the way forward. And we have been doing some projects, particularly one of the projects on solid waste management, where youth involved on proposing solutions to solid waste management in the cities. So again, think globally, act locally. So some of the engagements, this is actually a personal engagement from me, but then we brought that global engagement to local levels with the youths in the areas where we have developed one project on finding a solution for environmental pollution. So again, we introduced a concept called service learning approach, where the undergraduates do some kind of community solution programs to do some change in the community. So the service learning approach has been used at the undergraduate level to engage them while they're in the university to do some community work. Then again, we reach global through that. Right. So finally, I just put this slide. So what we can do, what we should do. So we have policymakers, practitioners, researchers from different institutions, but the need for increasing dialogue and then cross-disciplinary approaches, particularly on the research as well as in the work that we do. So cross partnerships and cross-disciplinary approach, we need to go forward. So I think I will. That's it from my side, and I'll stop at this point. And then, yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Saja. Thank you for taking us through the SDGs in Sri Lanka and the challenges, and also very glad to see the local initiatives that Sri Lanka has been doing it, and like we have also, we mentioned this thing globally, act locally. So this is the